Listen, everybody, we are trying to figure out some sound issues. We're not professionals. We're doing this podcast for free, all right?
For free, but if you did experience any sound issues on the last episode and during our interview with Lesley Bannatyne, it's my fault. I apologize. But hi, we're here. I'm Krisserin Canary.
And I'm Kelton Wright.
Follow our quest to publish our first novels.
From first drafts to query letters,
through inevitable rejection
and hopefully eventual success.
from California
To Colorado, this is Pen Pals. We're here with our mics and our headphones, living the
Mhm.
life.
back in our comfortable spaces, recording from our home studios.
My home studio has been a little wild this week. Ben got the flu, and we're sort of doing everything in our power to not let me get it or give it to the baby.
Yeah.
The toddler, excuse me, he's not a baby anymore. And so Ben has just been hiding out in the basement, and I've been solo momming upstairs with like all my clients and my projects and my child. And of course, this is the week that I was like, you know what? We're going on a little vacation this weekend. I'm just going to give myself off from the newsletter. I'm going to make this week flow and be easy. This is the second time this year that I have given myself time off from the newsletter, and then someone has gotten sick and my workload has doubled. So I'm like, I feel like I'm cursing myself. I should have just written the newsletter.
So unfair. It makes me so mad to hear that. Oh man. Well, I'm happy to tell everybody that Kelton met her goal. I can say that because I was the recipient of the output of it. But she sent me her memoir proposal an entire day early, actually. You sent it to me on the 11th, I think.
Yeah, well, I wasn't
Yeah.
going to be able to work on it on the 12th. So I was like, this is as far as we're getting.
How does it feel?
Well, I'll let the listeners know that Krisserin slacked me and said she had her feedback, and would I like to receive it all written out, or would we just like to talk it through? And I, as a fixed mindset, terrified little bunny, was like, oh no, it's horrible. The proposal's horrible. I have to start over. I have to start from scratch. So I still don't know what Krisserin's feedback on it is. So how does it feel? It feels nerve-wracking.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to like throw you into a stress spiral.
Yeah, it was like when
I
your
say
boss is like, just puts a meeting on for Monday and it doesn't say anything about what it is.
Now I feel like an asshole.
Not at all. Not at all.
So the reason I asked that is because I would have sat down and written it out. It was just, I figured, easier to talk through. And I did send you, to be fair, I sent you my like marked up version
Mhm.
of the proposal. So you could see the notes that I had as I was going through it, but then I had like overarching notes that I thought we could talk through. I thought that would be enough for you to.
I didn't open it yet because I was like, well, I want to talk to her first.
Oh, well, we can talk about it. But I got back from Arizona on Friday, and I then proceeded to sleep Friday and Saturday, a total of 23 hours. I was so
Wow.
tired from that trip. I had a great time. It was probably one of like the best birthday weeks of my life. It was really fun. And we had those like 2 amazing interviews in the span of that week too. So I think that overall it was just like a really fulfilling time, but I was tired. I was
Yeah.
really tired. And I think when I looked at the amount of, so I revised the first like 67 pages of the second book, and I have since gotten to, hold on, I have it here. I'm one of those people that likes to track progress on things like a psycho. Of course, I don't have it open and I don't know where it is, but I think that I've gotten through an additional 4 chapters since we spoke, but I have like I got to page 109 and I have 190 pages to do. So I did get some work done, but this morning I just like slept right through my alarm, and I wear my watch at night to track my sleep and to set the alarm so I don't wake Boyan up when it goes off at 5 a.m. And I must have just like turned it off and went right back to bed. I have no recollection of
And does
doing
this
it.
all the time. Ben is constantly turning off his alarm, and who does it wake up? Just me.
See, that's why I wear my watch because it just vibrates on my wrist so that it
Even
won't
even when Ben had a silent vibration, I am, like, alert. I'm alert. I'm like, "What's happening?"
I sleep like the dead. I have earplugs and an eye mask, so unless I'm trying to wake up, I can pretty much sleep through anything, hence sleeping 23 hours over the weekend.
Incredible.
Um, but yeah, I only woke up once at 5 a.m. this week, and it was a struggle, and I had Chelsea Hodson's words in my head where she said, like, "You're getting up at 2:30 for a reason. You gotta get up and do it." And so I did, and I got through 3 chapters that one morning. So I did get some work done this week, but it's a lot less, um invigorating, I guess, when no one's waiting for the work on the other side, so it's just me. And once I
I'm
get to
waiting for
the
that
end of
work.
okay, fine,
You know, the
fine.
listeners are waiting for that work.
No, they're not. No, they're not. But, yeah, once I get to the end of those 198 pages, I gotta write the rest of the book, and I this book, I don't know how it's gonna end, so I'm a little, you know and it's gotta be I think I set a big challenge for myself because the book is international, it's global. The powers at work are scarier than they were in the first book, so I gotta figure that out.
Yeah. I mean,
It feels daunting.
it does sound daunting. Do you ever step back and, like, stop imagining it in a modern world and just be like, "What would this be if it was, like, a fantasy world?" I feel like because in fantasy, it's so easy to imagine overtaking Sauron, you know? Like, you can
Is
just
it?
yeah, because you can do anything. It's a made up world, you know? You're like, "Oh, I found a magical potion," or, like, one ring that had been buried forever. All I have to do is in the end of The Lord of the Rings, all he has to do is throw the ring into the fire. That's the whole thing. It takes a
But it
long
was
time to get there.
that's
They
the
could have
point, is
and they
like
could have just ridden those flying bird animals right in there and just walked in and blunked it in. But they had to write a series, okay? Don't come for me, LOTR. I love the series. But,
that's
I
funny.
do like imagining an alternate world where I'm not so capsized by modern politics to, like, sort of work through what an issue could look like.
Unfortunately, my book has modern politics in it,
I
so that's
know.
what makes it hard. It's funny you say that. I had a coworker who did have you heard of these PowerPoint nights where everyone, like, prepares a PowerPoint on a topic of their choosing? She did, how long would it take to e-bike to Sauron?
Oh,
Pretty
that's really good.
inventive.
Really good.
Yeah. Well, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I'm really trying to not think about it right now because I am intimidated by the whole prospect of it, but I will say that the work that I've done to get up to the point where I am in the book, which I feel is about halfway through the book or 2/3 of the way through the book, I think that I did, like, a pretty good job of setting things up. I just have to make my characters' lives worse, so I need to figure out how to do that.
Love that. We're going to jump into our interview with Lesley, which was so fun. The queen of Halloween. I
Queen of
loved her.
Halloween.
And I was really inspired after having that conversation with her and just felt like I'd found a kindred spirit in the world and one who loves spirits. So she was great. I hope you guys really enjoy this interview and kudos to Krisserin for locking it in.
Thank you. Well, without further ado, here is our interview with the great Lesley Bannatyne. Today on Pen Pals, we're thrilled to welcome Lesley Bannatyne, whose novel and stories, Lake Song, which I have right here,
Right.
won the Grace Paley Prize for short fiction. It was just published just in September, I think, right?
September 1st.
By Mad Creek Books. Lesley's debut collection, Unaccustomed to Grace, was nominated for the Story Prize and won the Harvard University Thesis Humanity Prize. But what makes this conversation so exciting is that Lesley and I both share a mentor in Dr. Elizabeth Sharp McKetta from Harvard University Extension Program. And another thing that's really exciting that we'll talk about is Lesley's extensive work on Halloween history. And it's perfect timing. It is October and it is spooky month. So super excited about that.
But before we start, if I may beg of you, Lesley, do you mind reading the first I don't know if you would call it a prologue, but the first page
Right.
and a half of Lake Song?
Sure. Desire covered the land like winter, demanding, unyielding, beatific, like the miles of low hills that stretched westward, uninterrupted by mill or derrick or brick. It was this torn pocket of west central New York that the Angel Maroney led Joseph Smith Jr. to the Hill Cumorah to receive the golden plates that would become the Book of Mormon. Here, visions came to Mother Anlia's Shakers, to Jemima Wilkinson and her universal friends, and to teenager Maggie Fox and her little sister Kate, who unwittingly birthed spiritualism in their bedroom. It was called the Burned Over District because there wasn't a single soul who hadn't been set on fire by religion. The resources of the natural world lay beneath their feet in the kingdom of heaven above their heads, and it was this bounty that encouraged the people who lived here to move in any direction or any dimension that brought them closer to the divine. It made them more susceptible, perhaps, to the grifters and wayward who followed the saints, but also to the inexplicable, the miraculous, and the glorious. It is here that you find a sprawl of lakes dug deep in the rock. Ocasio was the smallest of these, and the town of Kinder Falls sprang up around it. First, squatter shack, then houses, barns, stores, autos, sidewalks, electricity. The town grew, languished, prospered, suffered, boomed, settled. Throughout it all, people watched the reflection of the evening in water. Orange, pink, gray, dark stars. They listened to the loons wail, fish thrashing for insects, waves ticking off the minutes, hours, before bed. The lake gave all these, but the lake also took wedding rings, china, boats, watches, keys, glasses, shoes, bones, oars, tarps, umbrellas, towels, toys, shovels, wagon wheels, horseshoes, ropes, spoons, pipes, canes, and souls, drunken, confused, or misled. The lake was a diary. Wind turned the pages. Canoes floated like commas.
That last line slays me. I actually read this to my mom yesterday. I was like, Mom, I have to read this to you. Oh, it's so beautiful. You're such a beautiful writer, Lesley. And as I've been reading your book, I've been humbled at how much
Thank
work
you.
I have to do
Oh,
to become a better writer. But we're so thrilled to have you on the podcast and chat about your writing journey. So a lot of our listeners are aspiring novelists, aspiring first time. They're trying to get to our first, publishing milestone in our careers. And I remember when you came and spoke in Dr. Maquetta's class, you had a really incredible writing journey. And I would love for you to share with us kind of what that has looked like for you. When did you start writing? When did you decide you wanted to pursue publishing?
when did I start writing? I can show you. I still have my first rejection letter. It came when I was 6 years old. So I had submitted a story, or probably my first grade teacher had submitted a story, Flowers for Mother, which was probably a page long and included illustrations by the author. And she sent it to a publishing house in Chicago, and they wrote back. And it was not a hard no. I still have that out there, but it was, we encourage you, keep writing stories, and here are some pretty book covers. So I've always written stories from the very beginning. It was something that I love to do and something I did almost for entertainment as a child. And then I took a really long detour through nonfiction from the time I published my first book, which was on Halloween, in 1990. And so a good long time ago. And then after that, started to do a lot of nonfiction, and I wrote 4 more books regarding Halloween, around Halloween, a kid's book, an anthology, a lot of different ways of going in through this holiday and other holidays. And I also started writing for newspapers and magazines, fashion shows, everything I could get my hands on. And then the question is, when did you consider yourself a writer rather than an author? Because I think many people make that distinction. I was an author once I published a book, but then I really felt like I started to become a real writer when I started writing fiction because it was such a different animal and it required so much more of myself, my craft, my ideas, my brain, my imagination, everything. So when I started taking short story classes at the Harvard Extension School and wrote my first short fiction that I had written since I was 22, that felt like I had landed somewhere as a writer. And once I continued to do that and work at it and take classes and workshops and improve and get better and get myself out there, it started to make sense that this was something that I would spend a good deal of my life doing. So I've done it ever since.
What caught your eye about the Harvard Extension program? Like, what made you take the leap into taking that kind of class?
That's a great question. I was working at Harvard, and as an employee, I was a editor and a communications person there. And as an employee, classes are free at Harvard Extension. And I had been taking classes for more than a decade, in religion, in history, in Irish mythology, in anything I could find. And I came across a short story class and I thought, oh, I used to do this. I wonder if it's, still something that it's any juice there. And so I took the class and I was probably older than all the other students by about 30 or 40 years. And I looked around at this table full of really young, bright, vocal people who knew exactly what they were doing and what they were talking about and were enthusiastic. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But then I got the first assignment and it was just opened up everything. It was like, I explain it like this, which is the best way I can explain it. It's like going through your house and you find a room you never knew was in your house. And you walk into that room and it's a whole other house. So once I wrote the first story, I was completely hooked. And so I took more and more workshops, writing workshops, story workshops, intermediate story, advanced story. I'd taken about 8 and someone said, get a degree because I was just taking them independently because they were so much fun and I loved them and I was getting better. So I thought, you mean I have to apply? And so I did. There was an introductory essay of, I don't know, 100 words. Do you remember? It was something to prove that you could write a sentence.
That's right.
And it was a timed exercise. And I thought, again, a timed exercise? Well, no, all these things are not scary. They were not difficult. I actually could, in fact, write, 250 words in under an hour or whatever they required us to do. So I entered the program and finished the program in 2020.
I cannot believe you have not been writing short stories your entire life because you're so good at them.
Well, thank you. I have been writing stories my whole life, but just not in a read form. I spent a long time in theater where I also wrote plays, short playlets and scenes and things like that. So it wasn't like creative writing was completely foreign to me. But fiction writing and literary fiction was something that I came back to after a long, long detour.
What does your writing community look like? The people around you who support you and encourage you? And did you gain a lot of peers while you went through the extension program?
My writing community now is a wonderful conglomeration of a writers group that I've been with for about 10 years, 12 years or so, of maybe 6 or 7 people, plus readers that I've met along the way who are really wonderful readers. And in this, I include, of course, Dr. McKenna and some other professors that I did have at the extension school, but also colleagues, people I met either in the writing group who left the group, but now, live in Seattle or something. And other writers that I have met that there's a simpatico. So I now have many people I could send work out to and say, I'm not sure about this X, Y, or Z. Can you give me your opinion? So I do have a sounding board. Many of them did not come from the program. That was because I ended just around COVID, and we were all scattered to the four corners of the earth then, where we had been on campus for most of it, and then we dissipated. So I think we never got to graduate together. We never got in person. We never got that final piece of it. So I don't have as many writing colleagues from the program other than faculty, but I have a lot of writing colleagues from my area, which is Greater Boston, where there is a gazillion writers.
Amazing. Besides Dr. Maketa, are there other mentors or teachers along the way that helps you develop as a writer?
Yeah. Dr. Maketa was the first. And so she is, as you know, completely inspiring. Just, go, go, go. That's all she says, go, go, go. But I would say that, I could count on one finger the writing professors I had in the extension school that I did not completely love and got a lot from, as well as the people in my workshops where I got a lot from also. But because in the program, it's literature and creative writing, you take courses outside. I found those just as equally enriching. So, for example, my Irish underworld course was just as fascinating and inspiring as my 20th century short story course, which I was dreading because I was an English major. I had done this before. And here I was again, a long time later in an English class, looking at the Dubliners, which I'd probably written 5 papers on when I was 21. And I'm like, I have to write papers about this again? Are you kidding me? It was a humbling and wonderful experience to do that because you come to it completely differently at different ages and you write differently at different ages. And I completely thoroughly enjoyed all of the classes that were outside the workshop situation, as well as my workshops. What I think the workshops did, above all, besides giving you a chance to practice and get better and put something out there that other people talk about, is to become such a much better reader of other people's work. So that happened a lot during my years in workshop in the extension school, because each time you've got to read and critique and come up with interesting things to say about your colleagues' work. And that's a skill. And it's a skill that not everybody is great at. And so it deserves kind of polishing. And they do that a lot in the extension school. And I appreciated the guardrails, how you talk about work, what kinds of things you're looking for. You're not looking for your opinion about it. You're looking for what's the piece trying to do and how is it getting there. These things were incredibly valuable, I think, in the extension school.
All this practicing and learning and building your peer group, what was the leap to publishing Unaccustomed to Grace?
Yeah.
What took you from being like, well, I write these short stories for my classmates and enjoy this, to being like, I'm going to publish something?
Right. Well, it's luck and circumstance, and you're just at the right place at the right time. I was in a workshop and Elizabeth Maketa said, I'm judging this contest. Why, to all the students, why don't you enter? And I thought, I've got a story, I'll enter. Well, I entered and I won. So that brought me out to the Southwest to do readings and gave me a lot of encouragement. You win one contest, you think, oh, okay, maybe I have something here. And so I would go out on one of the many, many Poets and Writers, Duotrope, Chill Subs, submission sites, and look for places that were having contests. And because the first contest I won came out of New Mexico, I thought, hey, the Southwest sounds like a great place for me to submit my work. I had success there before. So I submitted to the Tucson Festival of Books fiction contest, and I won it. And so I went to Tucson and did a workshop with them and met a lot of wonderful writers. Again, this is how you build your network. Met a lot of wonderful writers out there sitting around in the desert doing workshops and getting together. It was wonderful. But I mean, those are 2 lucky breaks, but they happened because I had a piece ready and I submitted it. I could have just as easily passed by Tucson and said, nothing, I'll never win that one. Or, I applied because they take the top 50 and give them a free workshop. And I thought, well, that could be interesting. And so I kept applying to contests and I kept sending work out. So that was the break, I think. The fact that it does work, you can do it. And I'll tell you another one that was very encouraging. Duotrope will break down how many acceptances each magazine has. In other words, how hard is this magazine to get into? And many magazines accept 80 or 90% of submissions. So the first story I ever sent out, it was called Salt. I just looked for something that accepted 80% of submissions, and I sent it to that magazine, and I got an acceptance within an hour. And I think
We're like, salt is exactly what we needed.
Exactly. We were just looking for this right now. So I think, there's no shame in submitting to magazines that are smaller magazines. Well, it's encouraging, and somebody gets to read your story, which is the whole point of it. So I considered that. I thought, okay, this is going to work. I submit, they accept, it appears. It's not like some thing that you can't see, some obscure thing you can't see. You can actually see how it all works. And now I'm currently reading for a literary magazine that's based in Boston. So I'm reading the submissions that come in. So now I'm learning about what it is to be on the other side, to get 1,000. I'm not reading 1,000. There's a team of readers. But to get a lot of submissions and read through all these stories and to see how you decide, how these decisions are made. And I can tell you, it's one or two people that like your work that makes a difference.
That's incredible. What are you looking for when you're reading these submissions?
I'm looking for a certain level of craft, which is very clear in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. And I'm looking for a story that draws me in. I mean, everybody says this, but it's true. I'm looking for a story that draws me in. So something needs to be happening right in the beginning, and it needs to carry me all the way through. And then I've read every single, I've read them in entirety. There are sometimes people will say, well, you don't need to read the whole thing if you know right up top that it's not going to work. But I read the whole thing because you never know what's going to happen in the middle. It could just switch around and be wonderful. And then somebody just needs to fix something up top. But it's got to draw me all the way through and not sort of go in different directions or peter out as it goes through. So a really strong through line, I guess, is what I'm saying. And characters that I either like or hate, at some sort of quest. And I don't mean every story is an adventure story, but every story is about something. And I need to feel that in the beginning and feel it all the way through. And other than that, it can be anything. I mean, I've been reading stories set in outer space and stories set on somebody's front porch. And, it doesn't matter where or what genre or what style.
I think a good example of what you're asking for is a story you wrote with a through line, an immediate hook, and characters is Corpse Walks into a Bar, which Krisserin sent me. And I don't feel like I'm giving anything away with the title of the piece. A corpse walks into this guy's bar and he asks him to get him buried. And that story drove me through propulsively. And one thing I really loved about that piece is that you don't spend any time like justifying it or explaining how or setting up this backstory. You're in it with the main character who's got to bury this corpse. And that's all there is to it. And I really respect that ability to not worry about all that background noise and trust that your reader can stay focused on what's happening. That is a big struggle for me. And I know it's an ambiguous question I'm asking, but how do you prevent the weeds from cluttering your story?
That's a wonderful way of putting it. Well, one thing is the reason I love short stories so much is because there are nice guardrails around them. They're contained in boxes. It's not a novel where the whole world is your oyster. It's a little box. So you can define that box. So if I say it's late at night and a corpse walked into the bar, you're either with me or you won't. Those are my guidelines, and this is the reality we're in. And so, follow me here. So I don't worry about that. You just set them really strongly. And I love that about short stories. In fact, it's why I continue to write short stories. But as far as the weeds, I can speak for myself in saying that those come out in revision. And that they're probably, if I looked at the first draft of The Corpse Walks into the Bar, I know I have the first sentence is the same because I know that's exactly where I started. But I bet there's another 10 pages of weeds that came out of that piece over the course of working on it. And that's explaining things like, where are we? And did we turn this corner? And how far was the street? And was there a street light? All that stuff starts to fall away once you see what you have, once it's driving through and you see all the things you can get rid of and still tell the story. And if your readers are getting lost or you're getting lost, you know that you need better words to describe what you're doing. So it's a matter of choosing, the right words. We all try to do that, but you can get rid of all the stuff because readers are really smart and they will follow you if you give them little teeny breadcrumbs all the way through and don't make confusing sentences.
Yeah, I love that. It's easier to see what's growing in the garden once you get the weeds out.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, sometimes you don't know what you're writing about until after the story is done. You really don't know. And then you think, oh, okay, this is about loss. Didn't realize that. I thought it was about a guy getting buried. I thought it was about finding peace. Kind of.
Yeah, Krisserin told me that short story was very funny. And then when I read it, I told her I cried the whole way through. So we had different reactions to it, but it was spectacular.
We both loved
Thank
it.
you.
So.
Thank you.
What does your writing routine look like, Lesley?
When I am working on a story, I write in blocks of 3 to 4 hours at a time, a few days a week, 3 to 4 days a week. And then I make careful notes of where I'm leaving off and where I'm going next, because I know I'm not going to get back to it for a couple of days just because of how life is. When I'm not working on a story, I tend to kind of glide around in the late afternoons and pick up things here and there, read something, write something down, take notes. So it's not as rigorous or disciplined as when I'm in the middle of working on a story. And when I'm working on a story, everything goes into the story. So whatever I read, whatever I see, your jacket, your headphones, the beautiful stone chimney behind you, it looks like a chimney, it's gorgeous. Those all become fodder if I'm working on a story. It's like everything goes into it. And when I'm not, when I'm taking notes or starting or thinking or in between, I'm just the same old, dunderheaded person that I always am.
What do you read for inspiration? Who are your authors that you just keep going back to over and over again?
I go to Toni Morrison for glorious gorgeousness and to be unafraid of writing hard things. She's kind of amazing that way. It takes such courage. I go to Karen Russell when I need inventive language. And you just, you never think of the words that she puts together are so inspiring. I love William Faulkner. And so just for like what writing can be, how many different ways it can go. I am a fan of Lauren Groff, short stories, particularly something called Florida, which I go to again and again because it's so emotionally sophisticated. So for that, I go to her. I'm Richard Russo and all of his New England stories. Love those. Richard Powers for really smart writing and how much you can put in a book. His understory was just knocked my socks off. It's about, nature and ecology and climate, but it was just so packed full of wonderful research and smart thinking. So different offers for different things.
I know you would do the extension program when you've had a lifetime of writing nonfiction and plays, but how do you continue to improve your craft? What is it that you're doing, practice your habits that keep you growing as a writer?
All right. I recently discovered this, that going to see other writers in book events is incredibly illuminating because, well, number one, you get to hear how they talk about their work, which I think really helps you parse your own work and understand your own work, because at some point you do have to explain your work and at least describe it. And I find that really fascinating because authors do it in so many different ways. So it's kind of like studying the population out there of authors and how they think about what they do. And I find that really helpful in terms of craft because there are things that they say that I've never thought about, like how you come into a story or how you build a character or a setting or something. It always, there's always something in there I can learn. I love that. I read, of course. I go to conferences and take workshops whenever I can, either online or in person, about things that I'm really interested in and from authors that I've heard of or know about or respect. And there's a lot of that out there, and much of it is free. There's the George Sanders Story Club that's a minimal, fee to join his Substack. And there's stuff online all the time. There was just a recent wonderfully wonderful literature festival by the Authors Guild that is online, that you can, if you're a member, you can access it and see a conversation between Marilyn Robinson and someone else. And it's always interesting to hear people talk about their work and say such wonderful things. So I think that goes to craft, and then reading definitely goes to craft, and then the discipline goes to craft. How do you keep doing it? You keep writing, and hopefully every book makes you better, a better writer, or every story makes you a better writer. So, I mean, those three things, they're different parts of the brain, but they all go into the same bowl.
How about craft's evil twin, marketing? Can you talk a little about, when you found an agent and publicity and obviously it's amazing to do all this beautiful writing and then you have to go make people read it. So how do you approach that?
Yeah. You asked this question at a good time because I have just, the Lake Song just came out September 1st. So this past month has been nothing but that. Let me talk about agents first, because my career has taken a U. My first book was A History of American Halloween, was agented. That was the only time I ever had an agent. And the only reason I had an agent was because she was my college roommate. And we were both starting out. She was starting out as a literary agent. I was starting out as a writer for hire. And she found out that a friend of hers was looking for holiday books at a New York publishing house. Okay, so this is how things line up. And you just have to be available at the moment to be able to take advantage of it. So she said, Les, write a proposal there's 2 holidays left, Election Day and Halloween. Write a proposal. I'll give it to Kate. I bet they'll take it. I went Halloween, Election Day. So I went Halloween, which was not the easier choice. And she did sell the book. That was my first and only agented experience. Every other book I have sold myself, except the 2 fiction ones, my 2 literary fictions, which were contest driven. So Unaccustomed to Grace was my first book of short stories. I submitted it to a competition by a magazine that I found that was looking for story collections. There are a few, less than 20, but a few. And it did not win. But the guy in charge of the contest in the press called and said, I'd like to publish it anyway. Okay. Okay. That works for me. That works for me. I'm happy. And that turned out to be just a wonderful experience. So Lake Song had a similar trajectory. So I had submitted it to a number of contests, and it won the Grace Paley Prize, which meant publication was part of that prize. So AWP, the Association of Writing Programs, Writers and Writing Programs, gave it the prize. And as part of the prize, Mad Creek Books of Ohio State University would publish it. That was an incredibly lucky break because, I had just written it and sent it out, and it happened really fast. I didn't expect it to, but it did. So all of a sudden I was dealing with a manuscript and finishing up, polishing a manuscript that I had no idea. I thought I had another year or two to kind of finesse it, but it got kind of compacted, and I was able to do that. So those are all unagented. The next time I write a story collection or a book or something, I'm going to have to go out and do the same thing I always do, which is try to query agents, try to enter contests. You try every which way you can to get it out there. I just this week got a rejection for Lake Song to a contest that I forgot that I had entered, and it wasn't in a submittable, it wasn't digitalized. It was some other kind of contest, and I just we regret to inform you we are unable to publish your book. And I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, you can send them a rejection right back. And I regret to inform you it has been published.
Or you could just send them the book and be like, joke's on you.
That actually just goes to prove that it's whoever the book lands with. You just don't know. As I said, it takes a person or two people that read it and say, wow, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And many people say this is not what I'm looking for. And it has nothing to do with how good or bad it is. It really is a matter of personal taste at a certain point. You ask about marketing. Regardless of who publishes your book, you still have to do a great deal of it yourself. And that's when your literary community comes into it, because those are the people you're going to depend on to help you get the word out and to show up at your book events and amplify whatever publicity you can do. Are your friends, your family, everyone you've ever met in your whole life.
I'd love to talk about Lake Song for a little bit because I'm really enjoying it. Both Kelton and I are obsessed with place, and Lake Song is definitely a place-driven story or novel in stories. So I would love to talk about how place functions as a character in your novel and it's set in the Finger Lakes in New York, right? I've been once. I went for a wedding and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I can see why it would inspire story. But how did the lake shape the stories that you want to tell?
Place is really important to me as a writer in general, because I think my ear is better than my eye. I can hear how people talk, how characters talk. I can't so much see where they're standing or what's around them. So if I use a setting in a story or a book, it's got to be a place I'm familiar with. And this particular place, the Finger Lakes, I am very familiar with this place. My grandparents bought a cottage there when they were first married. They gave it to their children gave it to my generation. And so with my cousins, I own this cabin on Cuca Lake, which is one of the Finger Lakes. I know the water, I know the light, I know the vegetables that grow around there and when, the farms, the trees, and how they bloom and shed. So if you're going to spend 3 or 4 years on a book, which you do, you need a place that's evocative, that's conceptually interesting, and that has enough detail that you can put your characters on it. They can walk on it. The fact that it was a lake is just a bonus for me, because a lake is such a great metaphor for everything. And this lake, it kills, it reminds you of your past, it unites people. It's a touchstone you come back to. It's actually a seat of memory, and it has layers. There was so much to do with the lake and the way the lake behaved in the book. So the lake is never just a lake, especially in this book. If there's a disturbance in the lake, there's a disturbance in the characters. If there's a storm coming down the lake, something is happening in the book. So it was a wonderful mirror for everything that was going on. Even the emotions of the characters, I could put into the weather and the lake. So it was so fertile an area to set something in. Not even to mention the history of the place, which is what I read in the beginning, is just all true. I mean, 30 alternative religions started in this tiny little place in New York State. So there is something about it that's got some magic in it. And what more could you look for as a writer is a place like that. So got set there because I was intellectually interested in it. It got set there because I have an emotional connection to it. And it got set there because water is such a great setting for anything. Water, woods, anything like that's got so much in it is so useful to a writer.
Still really sad about Mavis,
I'm sorry.
but I love that. It's okay. But I love that her canoe comes back. There's just the lake doesn't hold everything forever, and it does take and give, and it's remarkable how you use it as a place that kind of like, you have to come back to. And her ghost doesn't go away,
There you go.
which we love. We love ghosts. We love ghosts and magic on this podcast.
Yes,
for sure.
yes. Yeah, Mavis will be there.
Yeah. Why a novel in stories? I'm loving it. It's great. And I love that there's some chapters that are just like a page.
Right.
It's just a
Yes.
moment, and then we move on. It's brilliant.
Thank you. It evolved. I set out to write linked stories. I set out with the very first story about Mavis, which is the one I had the strongest idea for. And then I thought, pull a secondary character from that story and put it into the third. Pull a secondary character, pull it into the third, and chain them together this way. And then once I had them all, I realized that I had overarching themes and I had an actual kind of story arc going through the 100 years. And I thought, wait a minute, this needs to be knit together further. So I went back and I did two things I'll call portals and embers, and I'll explain them really quickly. But they were techniques that I tried to make this more of a novel than linked stories, because I think I had the material there, so I wanted to put it together more. The embers are actually a concept that Dr. McKenna came up with because she had read an early draft and she'd seen some of the in-between pieces, and she said, they're like embers. The story stops, but it's something still burning, and you blow on it and you get another story. And so they were in between. So I wrote more of those to continue the story, move the story ahead, or sometimes get up above and look down and say, okay, this is where we were. This is where we're going. This is what you need to know right now. And sometimes it was just me talking to you saying, this is important right now that you hear this. And so it was a way to connect the stories and connect with the reader and move the action along. The portals were ways that I tied it more together to make it more of a piece, which is there are many times characters in the early part will have visions of certain things or descriptions or understand a certain thing that a character later in the book will have the same thing. So they're seeing the same thing. One example, in an early story, a character thinks he sees a mother and a child walking through the woods, and his eyes aren't very good. But he looks again, he realizes it's a doe and a fawn. The very last story in the book, there's a mother in the snowstorm with a baby, and she's looking for shelter, and she looks at the snow, and she thinks she sees an old man. And she clears her eyes, and it's actually a buck. So she sees the buck. He sees the doe and the fawn, the man, the woman, and the baby. So they go like this through the book, and that happens a lot. Although, it's nothing readers have to know or find out, but hopefully the recurring images and recurring colors and recurring scenes and memories, different characters have the same memory in different generations, ties the community together and ties the book together. So I was able, when it was done, to put those in to add that layer, which, by the way, is really fun.
It feels like there's a lot of themes of memory and what you did see and what you didn't see, and ghosts and the being fully there and being in the background. And a lot of this feels very tied to Halloween to me and spooky. And it was interesting to hear your earlier story about working with your roommate agent and choosing between Election Day and Halloween. Did you already have a love of Halloween then, or did that spark it? And did that drive this current of underworld and overworld for you?
A little bit of both. I did, of course, love Halloween as a kid because I was a kid in the 60s, so I could run around without adults. And it was very dear to my heart, and it's a nostalgic feeling when I think about Halloween, and it gets dark and the wind kicks up and, you smell those leaves burning, and it's like, oh my gosh, it is freedom. It's magic. So there was that in myself. But once I got the contract for that book and started to research it, it's such a big subject. You don't think about it that way. It's a kid's holiday. Most of us think of it like that, but no, 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 no. It's about so much more, and there's so much history to it, and there's so much folklore and, I don't know, popular culture and the way it reflects what we're thinking and doing. It's it's really a phenomenon more than a holiday, Halloween, or at least it's become one. So I got more interested in it as it went around. And as somebody who looks at Halloween, I often found myself on ghost hunts and talking to people who believe they talk to the dead, and talking to people who believe they are vampires, who really enjoy dressing up as a zombie and marching with hundreds of other zombies. So I did get out into a lot of alternative cultures and ways of thinking as a researcher, which I found fascinating. So, if that comes into my fiction, it doesn't directly, but I'm certainly very comfortable with the other world and thinking about it. I mean, many people don't like to think about death. I've been thinking about it so long that it does not seem like a dark subject to me. So maybe I have a great flexibility when it comes to the other world. I'm familiar with it.
I think it adds a beautiful layer to the writing.
It really does. And it's not surprising. I feel like all of the stories that I've read that you've written have this current of something beyond the veil of this, not just the life that we're living on Earth, but other things pressing upon us, which is really, really nice. Do you have a favorite fun fact about Halloween that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Wow.
Bit of trivia, something that we can impress people with. Be like, did you know?
Yeah. Wow. I have so many Halloween facts. I suppose one of the ones that people always want to know about is how old is it? And, you can find little tiny tendrils of it more than 2,000 years ago. So that's a kind of cool thing. And it has to do with, the dark and the time of year and all those things I mentioned that you notice as a kid, I think have come into it all this for 2 millennia at least. The fact that it wasn't a children's holiday until 1940 or so is kind of interesting. It was really an adult and everybody's holiday. The fact that it was Scottish as well as Irish to start is kind of interesting. The fact that you could stand in the crossroads at midnight and hear the future whispered on the wind is a pretty cool thing.
Love that. I love that. For our listeners who are working on their first collection or a novel, what would you say is the most important thing you've learned about submitting?
About writing or submitting? About submitting.
Yeah. Well,
to not hold back. I mean, submit. Go to Do a Trope and submit to something that you'll be accepted in. I think sometimes students say, no, this is a really good story. I'm going to wait for a really good magazine. I've never quite seen that work out for me anyway. It's just, keep putting it out there. Do not be discouraged by rejections. Everybody gets them all the time, and they're not personal. There is a volume you would not believe out there. This was both good and bad. Like, for example, this magazine that I'm reading for now, the last submission period, they got 1,000 stories. They published 8. So those odds are awful. However, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of magazines. And somebody reads them, and I think that you just keep putting it out there. You get your publication, you get a second publication. Pretty soon you will have more publications. If you submit for 30 years and no one takes your work, rethink that. But I bet if you have a good story you really like, send it out until somebody finally will look at it and say, wait, let's do this one. And it will happen. It will.
Now that Lake Song is out in the world, I'm sure you're already working on whatever your next project is, but what are you working on now?
I've continued to write short stories, and this next batch, I'm trying to work in animals and not in a way that, animals speak or take on human characteristics, but more that the intersection between humans and the things they do that we might consider animalistic. Like one story is about a woman who has glaucoma, so she uses her ears like a dolphin would in echolocating or a bat echolocating, because humans actually do that. If you cannot see very well, your ears get much better. And some people actually can figure out where they are by the vibrations of the structures around them. I thought this was fascinating. So I put that into a story. So it's about a very human person, but with some extraordinary capabilities that are actually realistic rather than surrealistic. So I'm doing that with a series of stories, different animal
That sounds
qualities.
right up my alley.
Right
it?
up Kelton's alley.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can
I
send
write
you
a
that.
lot about animals.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, my mom was a wildlife biologist, so I grew up with strange fauna in the house around me as my siblings, and it has greatly influenced how I see the world and how I
Yeah,
write.
that's wonderful.
When I sent Kelton your stories, I was like, I cannot, you guys, like, you're going to love her writing because Kelton and Lesley,
And
you
I
guys
do.
both have a lot of commonalities and
Yeah.
the topics that you like to write about and read about. So you definitely have some lifelong fans over here, Lesley. This was so much fun. I could talk for hours, and I hope we do end up getting to continue the conversation now that we've had a chance to chat. But thank you so much for your time. This was so fun. Do you have
My
any
pleasure.
other parting words of wisdom for our listeners who are just starting out and trying to, get their first thing out there?
Nothing other than what I've said, reading a lot, talking to other writers a lot, just kind of trying to keep at it. Don't get discouraged. Submit, submit, submit.
Where can our listeners find Lake Song?
Oh, Lake Song is on all your online bookstores, or here's a good thing to know. If you order directly from Mad Creek Books, it's also Ohio State University Press, and you put in the code LAKE, capital LAKE, all caps, when they ask you for a discount code, they will give you 30% off and free shipping. And that's better than Amazon.
Well, Lesley, thank you so much.
It's been so much fun.
Where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
LesleyBannatyne.com.
Amazing. All right. Well, and you're on a book tour right now, right?
Yes, I'm coming to the conclusion of the first part of book tour, and it's been fun. I gotta say, one of the most fun things about writing a book is talking about a book. So I thank you so much for this opportunity, because most people don't, you meet on the street or you volunteer with, they're not going to ask you questions like you have just asked me. So it's such a pleasure. And it's also a pleasure to meet people out in bookstores at book events who come, sometimes with questions or just curious, or, maybe they like the cover. It's such a pleasure.
Well, we will definitely link to your website in the show notes. And thank you so much, Lesley. It's been a joy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I emailed Dr. Elizabeth Sharp McKetta before we spoke with Lesley just to let her know, like, hey, thank you so much for introducing me to Lesley's work in your class. And I'm speaking with her and I want to be her when I grow up. And Dr. McKetta was like, I also want to be Lesley when I grow up. She's really inspiring. And, I feel like after that conversation, to me, well, first of all, you guys have so much in common, you and Lesley.
Yeah.
I feel like she is very much a kindred spirit in the things that are interesting to her, in the way that she writes, and the fact that she is obsessed with spirits and spooky things and Halloween. But obviously, I've read a bit of her work and I'm halfway through her book, Lake Song. But how did you find her? Because this is the first time you kind of have been introduced to her and her writing.
I mean, I found her deeply charming.
Mhm.
She has such a good attitude. I love that about a person. I love a person with a good, curious attitude. I loved her approach to writing. I love her consideration of place as a driving force and almost like omnipresent character. And I mean, after we got off with her, I was like, I gotta go work on my novel. I went and worked on the novel. I found it quite motivating. I ordered her book too. So I was like, this is one I gotta have in my archive personally. So happy to have met her.
Yeah, her book is so good. It's very humbling to read work like that because it is really good. And what I came away from and what I loved, because I asked this question to Chelsea, and I've been thinking about it myself a lot, and that's why I brought it up with Lesley, which is how do you continue to improve as a writer? And I thought her recommending going to writers' events and listening to writers talk about their work and going to conferences and conventions was deeply helpful because, when you listen to writers talk about their process or, what they're thinking about the ideas they're turning over, it is inspiring. So I think, I think that that's something that I'm going to look for more of in my life is how can I attend more writers' events? How can I meet more writers and be a better member of the literary community? But the most interesting thing is that she doesn't have an agent. And
Yeah.
she's going to have to start the querying process. The fact that both of her books that she's published were published because she won contests, which of course she did because she's an incredible writer. But what an interesting way in for a writer who is trying to break in a non-traditional way into a very traditional publishing world. So I found that hugely inspirational as well.
Yeah.
That there are other ways to make inroads if you don't have an agent, which is
You just have to win.
You just have to win. You just have to win. But I think that when you get to a place where you're confident in your work, and that's another thing from the Chelsea interview that I was thinking about, she works on it enough where she knows it's good. By the time she's done, she's like, this is good. I'm confident that I've crafted this to the best of my ability. And when you go out and submit, I think that you're in a good place because you've done the work. We talk about doing the work, but
Yeah.
Lesley obviously does the work and she's winning.
Yeah. I have a lot of respect for that. I feel like a lot of the things I write are like feral cats. Like I'm trying to get them to stay in the house, but they just want to escape on their own time. And they're just like running out the door before I can get them in shape. And I know that that's my own impatience acting as metaphor, but I have a really hard time waiting on something. When I write an essay I really like, I'm like, press publish. I don't want to send this to anybody. I'm like, we're not sending this to the New York Times or the Guardian. We're just putting this on Substack where no one cares.
So let's talk about that because having read something that you've poured over and edited quite a bit, I will say that I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Between the things that you
in a good way or a bad way, because like I listen.
Does it have to be that binary?
Yes, it does. Because it's either leans good or it leans bad. And I feel like I just like the things I write so much better when they're not obsessed over.
I think that the things that you write that are not obsessed over are better.
Yeah. Listen, I fucking know. I know.
Which is, that's what I was saying about the first chapter of my book because I had overwritten it. I over kneaded the dough on that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And as I eased into the rest of the novel, it flowed so much better.
Yeah.
And I do think that there is something in obsessively, which of course we're like, do the work, make it good, blah, 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 blah. But here we are saying
yeah,
conflicting messages on this week's pod. But here's my note. Here's my overall note. I think the beginning of your manuscript proposal has the kind of here's what this book is about, right? And here are the different sections. A lot of that felt very inside baseball to me as someone who doesn't know anything about these topics or terms, which I think for the agents that you're going to query, they'll probably read that and understand every word of it. But for me, I was like, I don't know what any of these things mean.
Like what?
That's purely my ignorance. Oh, I mean, just, when you're referencing the other writers that you drew inspiration
from.
Yeah. Is the green 5 a thing you made up, or is it a thing that exists?
It's something I made up.
Okay. I just think that some of the language that you're using to describe the positioning of the book feels like you're talking in abstract. And then when we
Yeah.
get into the chapters, when it's a little bit more specific, it feels more, to use your word, easeful. It feels more alive, right?
Well, I mean, that feedback I can live with. Like, the proposal itself is just meant to be like, could I sell this? You know, and then if the chapters, like, that's the part I need to feel easeful. I don't need the proposal to feel easeful, especially because right now it's like I have a list of 3 agents where friends are going to send the proposal.
Amazing.
And so
Amazing.
that I'm like, that's a selling document. And so I agree that document is like gross. Like having a positioning
gross.
statement
I
and like
know. Well, it just feels
listing the famous people I know. Like, what a nightmare.
that didn't bother me. I thought that was great because you're saying like, here's part of the marketing plan for the book. I thought that was great. So here's my question. This is my big note. Because the part of the book that's like, this is memoir, this is the idea that I want to bake out into the story, feels like it's very intentional, right? And then you get to the essays and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've adapted these essays from things that you have written to like match this theme of the memoir. Is that correct?
Some of them, I would say it's 50% new.
Okay. Okay. Because I feel like the areas where you are trying to match the essay to the memoir are the weakest.
Yeah.
The parts of the essay that are just like you talking about the house.
Mm-hmm.
I love the house as a character. It's incredible. And there are lines in there that I was like, I love this. This is amazing. But it's the parts when you're like, let's map this back to this idea that I'm like, this feels like an effort. This doesn't feel
it is
easeful.
an effort because it's like,
Right.
if it's not mapped to the memoir, then it is just a Substack. Then they're just rambly essays about living in the mountains, and you can't sell that if you're not famous.
Okay, but here's my question for you because I don't think that's true. My question is, do you want to write a memoir or do you want to publish a book of essays? Because I think that you could still have a theme around your book of essays, but it could be, I think, a powerful book of essays.
Okay, so I have a different proposal.
Well, and here's the thing. Let me just like couch all of this with the biggest disclaimer that I know nothing about memoir or nonfiction.
I will
so-
let the listeners, I want the listeners to know, I also sent this proposal to a friend of mine who has a best-selling memoir, and she wants to get into critiquing memoirs as something that she offers professionally. And so she has offered to critique my proposal for free just so she can count how many hours it takes her. And so she can like establish a working rate to do this kind of thing. And her memoir was incredibly marketable. I'm holding back her name, because I wanted like to interview her later in this podcast, but also because she's doing me a professional service for now that we're still negotiating. But I'm so curious to hear her balance between if the proposal needs to be that selling document. But the other idea that I had was just a book of essays, and it was loosely going to be called Good Wood, because the through line of every essay was wood. But that, the thing with that is I kind of capped out at like 8 essays, and those essays are not going to be like, 10,000 words each. So 8 is not enough. So I hear you, but I'm working with what I have so far. I'm glad most of the writing felt okay, and it just felt ham-fisted into the concept. But
yeah, big note. But
yeah.
the other thing is that like this idea of finding home, I think is very powerful. And you have such interesting places you've called home, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that you need to go off and write about your time living on a sailboat in the Caribbean, although I'm sure that would slap. But the one line that I was like, as I was reading through the beginning of the proposal, the one line that I was like, yes, was the question, what does it take biologically, emotionally, spiritually for a woman to feel at home in her own life? And I was like, that is an idea that every woman can relate to and can respond to. I had like a physical reaction to that because I was like, that's something that I want. Whereas the other ideas were these almost intangible, abstract concepts that I was like, this is cool. This is cool. But then when I read that line, I was like, that's me.
Yeah, but I think that's what I want the book to answer through those concepts,
Mhm.
because the reality is if I just write about living here, most
Mm.
women would never call this home. And they can't find that feeling of home through my feeling of this home. Because the things I want, where I'm like, I want my hands to freeze in the cold rain while I chop wood. Like, does that sound like your feeling of belonging?
Right, but that's the difference between a memoir and a book of essays. A memoir is like, I've learned these things, take these things, apply them. You can apply them to your life,
That's
right?
what I
Or
want to do.
whatever.
So when I talk about my hands freezing, for me, that is one of those 5 elements that I bring to life in the book. And the idea is probably that I talk about in like 2 or 3 chapters how I experience that. And then the last chapter in that section is more like about finding that in your own life. Like,
Mhm,
I
mhm,
think that is what sells the concept. I agree with you
mm,
that one sentence is the backbone of the book. But
mm.
if I'm just writing about being like a mountain woman, it's like then that only
Mountain woman.
appeals to mountain women.
Right. But that line is almost the last thing you say before you
I
go into
I think you're right.
the
I do need to
parts of the
highlight that line.
parts of the book, the chapters are the strongest are the ones you're talking about your personal experience.
Yeah.
It's the ones that you're more infused into. So again, I think that it is hard. Like, this is hard work. And I was reading, I'm like, damn, this is hard work, Kelton. You're gonna have your work cut out for you. And I'm not saying that you're not capable of it. I know you are. But I do think as you're thinking about like, how do I make these essays into a memoir, the work that is involved is going to be pretty intense.
Well, I better get a 6-figure deal.
Fuck yeah. That's my like overarching note. And then I have like other little notes in there,
Yeah.
but I think that the way that you've written the proposal at the top, like I said, I don't know. It's like, who's the market for this book? If it's for people who loved braiding sweetgrass and that this is like their thing, which I feel like you do want to be on the shelf next to those people.
Yeah.
But then can you be on the shelf next to those people and be broadly marketable to every woman?
Yeah.
That's an open question. Maybe,
That's the
probably.
goal.
You could do it. I think you could do it.
I think I can do it
But
with
it
the
is
right
like
agent.
the marrying of the two, because it's very heavy on the like, I'm an expert in these things. And then when we get to the things that are more related to you, that's where me, as someone who's not deeply involved in that area of nonfiction, really responded to the work, the every
That's
woman
good.
content.
That's good. I think that's
Okay.
good. I can swallow that feedback.
Okay.
Let's talk about our goals for this week, because
Mhm.
mine come right off of this. I was meant to be heading toward New Mexico tomorrow for a getaway camping with the boy and the hub,
Great.
but he's sick. So
Mm.
I'm going to spend all this weekend just taking care of the child, and that's it.
Just
So
so Ben can recover.
yeah,
Yeah.
so far, like, we've done a really good job of managing Woods not getting sick. I'm happy with him to get a cold from daycare, but I don't need him getting the flu right now. I don't want to deal with that. So I think like a couple more days for Ben to recover, and like maybe, Woods and I can like go to the hot springs or something and do something kind of magical for ourselves. But it does mean I don't have any childcare for the next Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This next today, 4 days. it's just a lot of me and baby, which is great. I'm going to do a lot of hiking. The leaves are pretty much all gone from the trees here. There's a lot of snow up high. So I'd like to hike up really high and touch some snow for the first time this winter season and just get into some deep inspiration and think about the essays that I want to include in the proposal in the memoir and maybe do some narration out on the trail. I am hosting session 3 for
What's your
me
plan?
tonight.
What's your plan?
My plan is to be loosey goosey. I want to be loosey goosey this weekend. I have a lot of
Yeah.
I just am tired. I haven't been sleeping the last like 2.5 weeks. So I'm like, you know what? I sent out the proposal to who I needed to. I'm taking a week off from the newsletter. The plan is to just think and not to commit anything to a deadline, a word count, anything. I've earned it.
You have.
And
You
we're
have.
halfway through the class. Tonight is session 3, and that is going smoothly. And I want to start thinking about what the winter session looks like. So I'm just going to let my brain swirl like a fresh winter storm.
I love it.
What's your goal?
My goal is just to keep on keeping on. Just keep waking up early. I have continued to speak my book out loud as I am revising. So I'm going to keep doing that. And hopefully, by the time we meet next week, I will have finished. At least I've gotten through the rest of the second book that I have already written and not feel like I'm on the edge of a cliff with no idea of what I'm going to do next. Hopefully, I'll have some inkling of what the next step that I'm going to take in the story.
Yeah.
And I'm not so scared. My goal for the week is to end it not being too scared.
Good. What a dream.
Yeah. What a dream. What a dream. So that's my goal for the week. And I hope that I was asking you what your plan was because after reading your memoir, I don't know how, but I got onto again, Mount Everest TikTok. I'm getting all this content about avalanches and I read your story about your neighbor and I'm like, Kelton lives in a dangerous place. And, I am very much guilty of telling my children to be careful all the time. All the time. And so I have to think about that personally in my life.
I think
But I'm worried. Now I'm like, Kelton's out here. I was thinking in my head as I was reading this, Kelton's hiking all the time by herself and her baby. I hope she's careful.
I am incredibly capable and very prepared. I did miss the point that you say, what's your plan? Is exactly what I say to Woods all the time. What's your plan? What's your plan, pal? Where are your feet going? But, when I'm out in the wilderness here, I have my Garmin spot. I have extra provisions and water. I have extra layers. I have rain protective stuff in case we get caught in a storm. I have waterproof matches. Ben and I are real scouts about being out in the wilderness. And that, for us, it's the more you carry, it's just the better the workout it is. So I don't worry about this is too much stuff to bring. I'm bring it all. What is it going to do? Make me stronger? Oh no. The hiking we're doing now is really, really, it's high, but it's easy. And there is one trail that I had wanted to explore further and was asking a friend I knew who would have found it by now about it. And she was like, oh, it really cliffs out at the end. So if you're going to bring the baby, make sure that you also bring Ben. And I was just I love people here. They're not oh, it cliffs out. Don't bring the baby. They're it cliffs out. Bring an extra person and the baby.
I took Ren to the park in Calabasas. It's right down the street from Sabine's school. And the cross-country team was there. And I was watching them run. And I'm like, oh, there must be trails around here. There's some nature reserves snaking through the housing areas there. And so I was like, let's go. We're trying to kill time. Let's go on a walk on this little trail. And it's not whatever. And there was a lizard in the middle of the trail. And Ren just about lost her mind. Because I had just finished telling her, oh, we got look, there's a sign that says be careful of rattlesnakes. I tried to it wouldn't move. It was in the middle of the trail. So I kind of tried to gently nudge it with my foot and it jumped at me and we both were and sobbing. And I was like, This is embarrassing. I grew up in the desert, walking around by myself all the time, and I can't even take my 7-year-old on a little nature walk on a very well-drawn path.
God.
Well, I don't know. Kelton does it with a baby, man.
Yeah. I keep telling Woods when he's in the backpack because he knows the sounds for bear and for cat. And so I'm like, if you see a bear or a cat, you make this sound because I'm like, he's much more likely with his,
he's up high.
innocence,
He has a better
to like
vantage
spot
point,
a
yeah.
mountain lion. And I'm like, you tell mama if you see that lion, okay? We've got a protocol to follow.
Oh my God, Kelton. Here's the thing, because I know how dangerous it can be, I'm like, I'm good. Whereas I feel like I would almost rather be a little ignorant and just go off into the wilderness, but those are the people who die.
Yeah.
I'll go, here's my thing. I'll happily go on a hike with someone who is prepared. Myself, by myself, or like try to prepare on my own, I would probably be like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but if I come and visit you, I'll go on a hike with you because I'll be like, I can just turn my brain off.
I can't wait.
All right, Kelton. Well, good luck. I hope you have a relaxing week. And to everyone else out there, you know where to find us. Send us an email at officialpenpalspod@gmail.com. Follow us on all of the social networks at penpalspod. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week writing.
Be writing.